Inflation drops as expected. Liberal immigration policies fueled the housing crisis. Jagmeet Singh says, don't trust the polls. And so much on election 2025. And lots still on Buttongate. I'm Jim Check with Now Media. Feeling mildly better, a little stuffy still. And on the phone with me, Ian Burns, our managing editor, all the way out there in Ottawa. Beautiful day here in the Okanagan. Sun shining, traffic flowing. How's it looking in Ottawa?
It's another not very good day. Very, very cloudy and grey. Very ominous as the city awaits its new master.
Well, there you go. Inflation drops. And I'd say that's as expected as they take off the carbon tax. And then inflation dropped across Canada and across all the provinces. As expected.
I think this actually is before the removal of the carbon tax, but it is to do with gas because
gas has been dropping.
When Donald Trump decided to sabotage the global economy, naturally that means that people that invest in oil, so like commodities traders, think, okay, that means the world economy's demand is going to sink, the world economy is going to suck, therefore gas prices declined, and then that filters through to our inflation data, just like that.
Well, wait for the carbon tax to be removed, and you're going to see another drop because remember that they denied that it had anything to do with inflation, but you shall see energy is one of the biggest inputs in everything we do.
That is still, I mean, I know you said that almost as like a passing comment, but I feel like we could speak about that for many hours. My fascination with that is endless. The fact that we went through an entire period of intense political and media scrutiny, and the question was, does the carbon tax cause inflation? Can you believe that was ever even a question? And that, like Tiff Macklem, when he was grilled in the Commons committee, and it was kind of like that was the issue. It kept being pressed. Does it cause inflation? Does it cause inflation? What a surreal experience that was to sit through.
Well, I mean, again, common sense. If you take one of the largest inputs that goes into everything, energy's in everything we do. Like there's nothing that you can do that doesn't take energy, including fueling your own body. If you're fueling your body with food, which is your energy, it took energy to make that energy for your body. Everything's about energy. And then Absolutely. We're taxing it like it was a luxury. This is key. When it's a basic human necessity. You talk about basic human necessities. Rich cultures have an abundance of energy. Poor nations have a lack of energy. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, except the few sort of miraculous, oddball exceptions like Singapore or something like that. But I mean, they're famous because they are the exceptions.
Well, they're trading something else for the energy, though. Do you know what I mean? Like they still need energy. They're just trading something else. They have something that is of value to trade.
Yeah, they've made up for their lack of energy by specializing in something else, which is how they obtain it. Yeah.
Exactly. Energy is required. You've spent a lot, and even anybody watching us this morning is using energy with their laptops or their computers or their phones or what have you. It's all about energy.
Well, as you said, with their very sort of consciousness, in being conscious and being awake and alive, that also takes energy.
Yeah, you have to fuel your body every day. You have to put some food in it. And hopefully not just a bunch of high sugar content coffees and stuff like that. Some good stuff. Canadian housing demand and prices slide further in March, though. Canadian housing prices fell month over month again in March, and this is Canadian numbers as rising tariff turmoil and uncertainty is keeping home buyers on the sidelines. We're going to get an interest rate decision tomorrow. I'm expecting a half-point drop, so because they're going to want to try to do something right before the election here to make it look all rosy, right? So I think you can look for at a minimum a 0.25 drop, but I would say a half-point drop is what we're going to be looking at tomorrow.
So you think Tiff is going to step in to assist his predecessor?
Well, there's that. But the Canadian economy is on the table right now. It's on the table and not showing a lot of signs of life. It needs a couple of zaps. Yeah. And the only way to do it...
Inflation is not really a worry, at least at the moment, is it?
No. Well, as with energy prices coming down, that's a lot of inflation. So they got some room there. Like we should be seeing negative inflation for a bit too.
Yeah. And also people are kind of people are very cautious, aren't they? So it tends to be the case that when people are holding back, that's a deflationary factor, isn't it? So I guess that also gives them an opportunity to bring rates down.
Yeah, I mean we're staring down the barrel of stagflation, and we have been in that case for many times with a falling economy and rising prices too, right? So, but technology alone should be helping with decreasing inflation too. Technology is our path forward. And I'll say that over and over again too. Technology is our path forward, not punishment. There you go. And about 3/4 of British Columbians have cut their spending. 74% have postponed purchases as they take steps to safeguard their finances in economic uncertainty. Our old friend there, Gavin Newsom out of California, is trying to lure Canadians back to California. He's putting out some ads. Come to California. There you go. Our dollar's improving though, so.
I mean, California. Have you ever seen a part of the world lose so much of its reputation so quickly as California? I can remember when I went there. The first time I went to California was in 1999, which I suppose to a lot of people listening that might as well be like the 19th century or something like that. But I remember I went there and it was just like the movies. You know, it was a beautiful place, and I could completely understand why everybody wanted to live there. And then, what was it, about 15, 16 years later, it just sort of it almost became like a lesson for the rest of the world and what not to do. And I went back, I went back a few times, but I went back in 2018, and it was just like, what on earth is this place? What's happened to this beautiful place? So I don't know. Do Canadians want to go back? I'm not sure.
I've been to San Francisco 3 or 4 times, and the last time I went there, I said I'll never go again. It was like, I love San Francisco, but I wouldn't go again. Not right now, anyway. Yeah. So there you go.
Indeed. I mean, Los Angeles as well, and just that whole kind of Southern California, sort of, it's like a megapolis, isn't it? It's so developed, and there's just so much traffic, and there's so much chaos, and it just seems to have lost its charm a little bit.
The Fraser Institute put out a study, one of those like common sense ones. No, not that one. The Fraser Institute put out a study and said the Canadian housing crisis caused by a surge in immigrants. Imagine that, eh? Without the corresponding increase in home building. And they denied this one as well for quite a while.
Yeah, and they did that even. They were still kind of doing it even when Justin Trudeau came out, and he kind of smashed the consensus that had, for some reason, predominated for a number of years, that immigration didn't have an effect on anything ever, basically, and that the federal government couldn't do anything about it, even if it did. But this report from the Fraser Institute, it is one of those almost like silly reports where it's kind of like sky is blue, scientists discover or something. And it's like, oh yeah, but we do kind of, even though it's so obvious and everybody, as you say, with common sense already knew this, it is still good to have it confirmed by the sort of nerdy little scholar squirrels that operate in the background. It's good for them to do this because, when a consensus is smashed, you do really need to make sure that it's going to stay down and stay dead. And I mean, this key stat here for me is that in 2023, the ratio between new residents to Canada and new housing starts was 5.1 to 1. I mean, how could anybody that considers themselves competent in life have allowed something like that to happen? How is it possible to make such a gigantic error as that? I can't understand in my own life. I can't understand making a mistake that enormous for over such a long period of time.
And who did they blame? They blamed Airbnb. They said it was the Airbnbs that did this, not immigration that did it. It was the Airbnbs.
I think they also hinted darkly that maybe it was something to do with the racists, the conservative racists out there who were just anti-immigration, even though it's quite obviously has nothing to do with anything like that. It's literally a black and white numbers game. This is just something that you could do in a spreadsheet. It's that basic.
Yeah, a lot of gaslighting over it for sure, like denial. We could go back and play all those videos where they say that this wasn't the case, that like including the healthcare crisis where you can't get a doctor.
But
Same
then that's
thing.
the thing, though. This is where they complicate matters. They say we need this immigration because we don't have enough health workers, even though the vast majority of the people that were coming in as immigrants weren't health workers. And obviously, they also had a requirement for healthcare themselves, thus increasing demand as well as fractionally supply. But then the other one now, they've kind of stopped speaking about that one. But the one now that they concentrate on is construction workers. They say, oh, yeah, we need new houses for all the new immigrants. But to build those houses, we need new immigrants. It's just kind of like, it's this circular logic that it's almost like something out of Alice in Wonderland or something, isn't it? It's just completely demented.
Apartment rents have come tumbling down in Kelowna for sure, and a lot of this I give credit to the Liberals on this because they did that GST free for purpose-built rentals, and so there was a ton of rentals. Not much happening after they did the Airbnb policy in British Columbia. Really no for sale developments taking place. Like the cranes came down, the cranes don't go back up, so we're sitting with a surplus of units for sale, and then a lot of rentals, like all over Kelowna, lots of rentals taking advantage of that GST break. So the rents have come down about $160 a month, and there's lots of incentives here in Kelowna. So the vacancy rate in Kelowna is around 7% right now, unofficially, and you're probably going to see some of these people screaming that the Airbnb policy is now destroying tourism, and there's too much inventory on the market.
I think it's also demand cooled a little bit with the changes to
Immigration.
students, yeah, particularly students, because that was a lot of the demand in Kelowna, wasn't it? But I would still say in this article that Steve's written, it says 1850 is the average in March for a one-bedroom apartment. 1850 a month. I would just say, when I moved to Kelowna not that long ago, in whenever it was, 2019 or something like that, the going rate for a one-bedroom apartment was something like 12, 13, 14. So
Yeah,
what is that? That's like 40 or more percent increase or something like that. Salaries in Kelowna obviously have not increased by that. So this is still like crazy overpriced and overheated, despite there being, as you say, like a relatively high vacancy rate.
yeah, like a lot of this stuff, just like interest rates, it took the elevator up and taking the staircase down.
Yeah, and and to go back to our friend, the ratio there, as we were just talking about in housing, the ratio still is not good. The ratio between average salaries and average rents, it's not good.
And I apologize if I'm sniffling a bit and coughing, still fighting that cold, as is Ian. Tough time of the year, especially when you have little ones around you that are basically spreading all that stuff around. I'm sure lots of people can relate out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's every month for me, I think, and now you as well. You've been brought into
Brought into that world.
of diseases.
Let's get in the election, and there's lots in here, lots and lots. Our friend Jagmeet Singh says, don't trust the polls. He said opinion polls are underestimating the party support and would be proven wrong. Polling does not seem to capture NDP support. There you go.
Maybe he needs to stop the steel badge. Shouldn't have taken it to the Conservatives.
Yeah, I think a lot of the dislike for Justin Trudeau is landing on Jagmeet Singh and not on Mark Carney. Mark Carney seemed to have skated past that, even though he has the same team, same crew. The guy wearing a lot of the dislike for Justin Trudeau is Jagmeet Singh and his party.
And even though as well, Mark Carney was part of the team for a number of years. But that seems to have been completely forgotten, doesn't it?
He was in the shadows, so.
Yeah, I would say though on polls, I'm usually quite skeptical of polls, and I think you're right to be, given all the mistakes that were made. 2016, that was like the worst year in history for polls, probably, wasn't it? Where they got the Trump election completely wrong, and they got Brexit wrong as well, and it got worse after that. But you interviewed Mario Canseco, who runs a polling company in Vancouver not so long ago, And he explained to you that after that bad year, they improved their methodology or whatever it is. They improved the kind of techniques that they employ, and now they're a lot better. And you don't just have to take his word for it. I mean, just look at the previous elections, particularly in Canada. They do get it right, and it kind of sucks in a way because it's like you know what's going to happen before it happens, but it takes the surprise out of it, and it also obviously influences people as well. It influences the way in which people vote as well. It has like quite a profound effect, I think, on how people actually go into an election and who they vote for. But the bottom line is, and sorry to disappoint Mr. Singh here, they are broadly accurate, and every single poll for the last 2 or 3 months has shown a pretty substantial decline in support for the NDP. I mean, that can't all just be imaginary.
Well, we interviewed Kay Desjardins here, he ran as an NDP federally, and he's come out in support of the Liberals. And they've actually tried, I'd say successfully, have run that campaign across Canada and say, now is not the time to vote for the NDP. Now is the time to choose between the Liberals and the Conservatives. And we know most of the people that are in NDP camp aren't going Conservative. Even Tom Mulcair, former NDP leader, has said the same thing on the television show he's on. So they've
and it's been justified as usual by a crisis, as most things are lately. Do this thing that you wouldn't ordinarily do because there's a crisis, and it seems to be working. That message to NDP voters really does seem to be gone down really well.
The Liberals are definitely masters of a crisis. They always have a crisis that you need to do this or that. They're definitely, that is one of their superpowers, crisis.
Well, Mark Carney has said that he's a crisis specialist, hasn't he?
Well, I think they're crisis makers as well. Everything is a crisis, right?
Yeah. Well, they know how to use a crisis, maybe.
Pierre Poilievre pledges crackdown on scammers, and Carney offers a new benefit for some workers in the middle of their careers. So they had small policy announcements from both of them. But, lots of people, we do the stories all the time of seniors getting targeted by these scammers. They get more sophisticated all the time, these scammers, especially with AI and everything now. They can even use your voice and stuff to scam people out of money.
Absolutely. I mean, what Poilievre said is actually kind of important, I think. It's, as usual, it's like it threatens seriously increased punishments. And so, like, penalties, not just for the people that do it, but also for the banks if he wants to introduce new kind of responsibilities for financial institutions so that they can make sure that this doesn't happen anymore. But also to put people in prison for 5 years, I think, for if it's fraud over $1 million, 5 years in prison. I mean, I happen to think that that's insanely lenient myself. I think if you're guilty of fraud over $1 million, you should go away for a very, very long time. But apparently 5 years is what Poilievre thinks is hardcore. Anyway, and Mark Carney today has announced, it's a kind of unglamorous announcement, really, but he's saying up to $15,000 for certain workers who are in like AI, manufacturing, construction, healthcare. And I think he just said technology. It's all very vague. There's no real information provided in this announcement. But the idea is that, again, because we're being tariffed by Trump, we need to make sure that we have like the best workforce in the world and that we can sort of adapt very quickly and be very nimble. So that's the gist of what they announced today.
Yeah, the problem is when you don't have enough detail to know what it actually is, because if you look, you and I compared the housing platforms, and they're completely different. One offers very little to the taxpayer. The Liberal one offers mostly to the corporations. That's where most of that benefit for the housing platform is, whereas the Conservative plan is mostly geared towards the taxpayer. But they kind of use, like, even when they do their tweets and that, they're kind of like selective in their language to make it sound like it's a lot more, which is not good for the taxpayer.
No, and I think that's kind of, we were just talking about the polls there. I think that's reflective of the polls. because the Liberals are the incumbents. Not only are they the presently kind of in power, they presently have the Prime Minister, but they also kind of have the lead. It's like they're winning the game, so they're playing very defensively, whereas Poilievre is losing and he needs to score. You know, he needs to get goals, so he's on the attack a bit more, and I think that's being reflected in the policy offerings.
Well, you and I pitched the no GST on homes, and they both picked that up, and then we're now pitching no GST on everything instead of a taco and tinsel 2-month holiday. Remove the GST that Jean Chrétien promised to remove way back when, and then Stephen Harper removed 2% of it because it used to be 7% when they first introduced it to get rid of the debt, and then Stephen Harper walked it down to 5%, and I think he was going to walk it down some more. So why don't you just come out, Pierre, and just say 0 GST? That'll get the economy booming.
You could even say 0 GST on Canadian, made in Canada products.
You want to give all?
You can also get your Trump in there. Get your Trump punch.
There you go. Buttongate. This thing I don't think it's going to go away. You and I talked yesterday. CBC getting a little boisterous here. Let's play this clip.
And we got from the party yesterday was crap in terms of, there are stronger words I would like to use. It spoke around the issue without speaking to the issue. It was all this nonsense, passive voice, and it reminded me of the comms troubles they had when they were at 16% in the polls. So, Lisa, I don't know if they've learned from that near-death experience in terms of addressing an issue clearly. The Liberal leader was better at it today, but I take Jonathan's point. There's thousands of volunteers across the country, and there's always some meathead who's going to rip down a sign or something like that in a riding. But this is right out of the war room, this sort of thing, and it kind of undermines what Mark Carney's central pitch is to Canadians in this campaign.
For sure. And it was very nefarious. I don't think it was innocent at all. I mean, I looked up to see what the other buttons were that were out there. I mean, we've done button competitions in the past, but it's usually mocking people. It's not about actively seeking to draw attention to an issue to make it sound more Trumpy than what they are. So, for example, Lock Justin Up was one of them. Wexit Now. Make Canada Great Again. I mean, what is this crap? They should absolutely be off the campaign. They're lucky they're not getting charged. They should be talked about whether or not they're spreading disinformation by this committee in the House of Commons or by this committee of bureaucrats. I mean, this is absolutely outrageous. And for us to tut it away as...
There you go. And it surprises me that they don't name these two individuals. Or maybe it's more.
Me too. I find that a bit peculiar.
They know
but I think you're right to point out that they're getting a bit feisty there, CBC. You can tell that the fellow Cochrane is absolutely furious. And you often find this with reporters or anchors or whatever, anybody in the journalism sector. You'll find that the thing that makes them most angry, and I think this also applies to me, if I'm going to be honest, is when they do something that almost seems designed to insult the media, when they insult the intelligence of journalists. That's when you'll get them the most peeved. And he's really angry about there. If you listen, he's saying, it's the comms, it's the excuse, it's the way that they've just brushed this off and they're trying to treat the press like they're morons. And obviously that really tends to antagonize journalists.
Yeah, I think it's, again, it was trying to influence the election. I mean, that's what they're trying to do. And you and I talked about that yesterday. You can go back and watch that, if it's a close election, this could matter. And then we got another clip here from CTV. I'm going to play this clip here.
And we'll talk about this more later on with our panel. Why are those individuals responsible for it only reassigned and not fired? And isn't your party doing what I've heard people in your party say so frequently throughout this campaign. We're in a time of crisis. We can't be negative. We can't be divisive. Yet that's exactly what these staffers were doing. They were being very negative, very divisive. They were invoking Trump to further their own cause politically. Shouldn't there be more severe consequences for them?
Well, what they did is unacceptable. This is not the campaign we're running. Mark Carney was very clear and has apologized for that. That's not the values of our campaign. Our campaign is focused on issues. Our campaign is focused on providing providing a very competent, experienced plan that will allow for Canada to assert its sovereignty as a country and rebuild our economy so that we are less reliant on the U.S. That's the conversations I'm having at the doors. People want to they want to vote for Mark Carney and the Liberals because they see the experience that he brings to this really important work that needs to happen in earnest as soon as this election is over. That will remain our focus, and we'll make sure that we continue to run a thoughtful, focused campaign that is focused on ideas and having these very healthy democratic debate, not frivolous stuff.
These individuals, with respect, have not been fired, right? Again, they're not removed from, or even removed from the campaign. They've just been reassigned. And to be clear, what they were trying to do was make it seem like conservatives would say the election was stolen.
Well, what's the role of those individuals is that's a party matter, and for us, our focus is to make sure that we're running a campaign that is focused on issues. This is serious times. Canadians deserve serious leadership. That's what we need to do. That should have not happened, and we will going to continue to provide a plan.
I agree with him. It requires serious leadership. Where is it?
I would offer a translation of what he just said there, which is something along the lines of, I've got no idea what I'm talking about. I'm just trying to say what Mark Carney said and what the press release said. Please stop asking me this question because I'm afraid. That's basically what he said. I'm just going to keep speaking. I'm going to talk about democracy, and I'm just going to hope that if I keep speaking, then you'll drop this and we can move on to something else.
This is clearly a threat to democracy that you keep asking these questions. You have to understand that a threat to democracy is when you ask questions of us, even though we are the threat to the democracy. Is that how?
Yeah, I mean, again, all you have to do, it's quite a sort of simplistic technique, this, but it's important sometimes. All you have to do is imagine if it had been the other way around. And that exact same guy right there, Yassir, he was in that same studio with Vasi, but it was the Conservatives, the Conservative HQ that had done this at a Liberal-leaning conference. Imagine the words that would be coming out of his mouth right now. And that's it, you're done. Now you understand. You understand why what he just did there was an insult to the intelligence of pretty much everybody in this country.
So we have Robin Urback from the Globe and Mail also saying that Mark Carney wants to be seen as the adult in the room. No, not that one. I think we're ahead there. There you go, adult in the room. But I don't understand how they're keeping these people on. It blows me away why they haven't been named. Why hasn't CBC named them? Because I guarantee if it was Conservatives, they would already name them.
And also they would be constantly asking the question, why aren't they gone? Why haven't they been punished? Why is this not a legal matter even, like a civil matter? Or, possibly you could even argue a criminal matter, but I think that's a bit more obscure. Like, where's the sort of societal condemnation of this attempt to influence an election through, thuggish tactics? Where is it? This is the thing, when usually the Liberal Party comes out and says, we must defend democracy. Democracy is sacrosanct. We have to erect a firewall around our glorious democracy. The reason that a lot of people roll their eyes when they hear that is because when something like this happens, which is a genuine, bona fide threat to democracy, as clear as day, the Liberal Party does not take it seriously. Therefore, we can only assume that they're not actually that bothered about democracy.
There's an opinion piece that was in the National Post again, talking about Mark Carney has promised heat pumps and prefab homes, both of which Brookfield makes. And that is, again, a potential conflict of interest. Again, the blind trust, which he won't reveal. It's not really blind to him because he knows what he put into it. It's just blind to the rest of Canada. So I guess that's when he's speaking of a blind trust. It's supposed to be the other way around, but it's just blind to us. Like we talked.
Yeah, we're the blind ones.
If you go on our YouTube channel Now Media, you'll find us, Ian and I, breaking down the housing platforms, and you're going to see where this comes out too. Because most of the housing platform for the Liberals favors the corporations. There's $25 billion in financing available to modular home builders, which Brookfield Asset Management owns a modular home builder, and another $10 billion in easy financing for corporations that make low-cost homes. And then they've also reenacted the MURB, which was, they removed that way back in the 80s because it only benefited developers. So again, heavily weighted towards corporations and not so much for the taxpayer. You can go watch that. It's a good breakdown.
Yeah, but this is also something we've seen. This has been happening during the Trudeau government for a long time, and we're going to talk about Honda, I reckon, soon enough, aren't we?
Yep.
That's one example of where they give these tax credits and all these perks and easy loans and all the rest of it. They did it in my benighted land of birth. They did that many times in England, where they gave loads of money to stupid schemes that were never going to work for solar panels and things like that in one of the cloudiest countries in the world. And all it ends up being is corporate welfare, as you sort of hinted at there. But I'd also say, somebody in the chat there, Peter Kennedy, has asked, how do we know that the Liberal staffers weren't fired? The reason we know that is because Mark Carney yesterday said that they weren't fired. He said they were reassigned. So it's out of the horse's mouth. That's how we know.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. He said it several times too. So they were just reassigned. So there you go, Peter. And this story, it's just out there all over the internet. We thought we'd just put it in here and say we're going to take a look at it and see if we can find more on it. It talks about 2 RCMP officers, one former and one existing, that put out a report here naming 9 ministers as being in conflict here. So, but again, we won't do much on this until we see if that, but it's all over the internet right now. It's all over. I don't see a big news outlet picking it up yet though. So, because it is kind of a messy thing for sure.
As it stands, that this is just a claim on the internet, isn't it? Really,
right,
this is going to need some digging and work to find out if it's just a fraud or if it's actually got any basis in reality.
Yeah, because if it's true, it could be pretty damning. But you know, until it gets picked up there, just like Buttongate at first, it didn't really get picked up much. And kudos to Kate McKenna there from CBC for actually doing the story, because I believe from the reaction that she got from the Liberal staffer was that that you know, he was actually thinking that she'd be proud of it and would just kind of like help out, write the story.
But like we've said many times, you know, if you're that journalist, the specific one here, McKenna, that we're talking about, that wrote the story, if you're this journalist and you've got your high-paying job at the CBC, like really secure job, you're never going to lose it, really. You'll have a pension and all the rest of it, and all the other perks associated with working for the CBC. Like, you're not pressured by commercial necessities. You know, life can be a little bit smoother and easier because you work for, effectively, you kind of work for the government, don't you? So she's got all of this. That's all on the line in this election for her. Because Pierre Poilievre, just a couple of hours ago, reiterated again that he's going to defund the English language CBC. So she's got all this spinning around in her head. And then she sees this. This actually happens in the most bizarre way. She overhears some idiot Liberal staffer talking about planting buttons with the intention of trying to make the Conservatives look like Trump. She sees this and she knows if she writes the story, it's going to reflect really badly on the Liberal Party. But she still did it. And the Liberal Party is the party that said not only are they going to keep the CBC alive and funded by taxpayers, but they're going to increase that funding. They're going to make it even cushier and even easier and more secure. But she still did it. So I kind of think she's really shown, I would say, in that one instance, that she has integrity. So I would say that's very important, and that she's sort of one to watch, I would say, for that reason. She's clearly shown that she will put truth ahead of literally her own livelihood. So that's, you know, quite impressive.
There you go, and that's why we said kudos to Kate McKenna. Good job, Kate. Working for the Canadian people. There you go. CTV News had this out. A whole bunch of people now covering it too, that Honda may make 90% of its U.S. sales locally by relocating to Mexico and Canada, relocating Mexico and Canada production to the U.S. We got a little place here from CBC, a little clip here too. I want to play a little bit of this clip.
We're going to lead off with breaking news this hour about the U.S. trade war on Canada and U.S. President Donald Trump's attempt to force automakers, all manufacturers really, but automakers the focus here, to pull production from Canada and set up in the United States. There is a story out of Japan this morning that CBC News is working to confirm, but the Japanese news outlet Nikkei is reporting Honda Canada is considering moving some production to the United States out of Canada. Now, Honda Canada's plant is in the Ontario city of Alliston, and our CBC News drone has been flying over this. This is just northwest of Toronto. Nikkei is reporting this morning that Honda Japan is considering shifting production of the CR-V and the Civic sedan to the United States. The report does not name its sources, but it does cite Canada's retaliatory vehicle tariffs against the United States as being a factor. Here's the line. Canada has hit back with a retaliatory tariff on car imports from the United States, and as such, Honda will examine cutting back on the number of cars exported from the United States to Canada and gradually shifting to local production. That is a quote directly from the Japanese article. The Trump administration has a 25% tariff in force on foreign-made vehicles. There are complex exemptions, though, involving Canadian-made cars that meet the standards of the Free Trade Deal, CUSMA or USMCA. Canada's tariffs are on U.S.-made vehicles, and it is now unclear how this would affect production here. We're getting a lot of response.
There you go. You can go watch that full clip there. But Ottawa has responded, though, and they're saying they're going to drop some of the retaliatory tariffs on auto imports from the U.S. as a way of helping automakers based in Canada. So that was Francois Philippe Champagne said that he's going to lift those retaliatory import taxes for at least 6 months.
Yeah, we should also say Doug Ford and Mark Carney have both tried to they dismiss this story. They said that it's inaccurate, and that Doug Ford said he literally spoke to the Honda CEO today. And I think Carney said that he's been in touch with the CEO as well. But the reality is this was kind of inevitable anyway, wasn't it? When you've got two markets there. One of them is the world's biggest consumer, the richest country in the world. That, you know, a place where they buy things at the drop of a hat, and it's like that's if you want to sell anything and be rich, pretty much you've got to have your eyes on the United States, haven't you, as a target? And then the other one is Canada, a country of about 41 million people, where it doesn't have that same culture of consumption, and certainly is not as wealthy as the United States. In that situation, if you're literally pushed and you have to choose between one, you've got to choose the US, haven't you? And that's just business. Well, despite them having been subsidized by us, the Canadian taxpayer, over the years, that counts for nothing, does it?
Well, you and I have talked about this many times. If Canada does not drop the EV mandates, there will be no automobile sector in Canada. And that's plain and simple. They've dropped it in the United States, so companies like Honda, which doesn't make a lot of EVs, Honda, GM, Ford, Stellantis will move production south where there is no EV mandate and where the bigger market.
Yeah, they're not. Companies are not going to tolerate that kind of punishment.
What's that?
They're not going to tolerate that kind of punishment. No. They're not going to tolerate a situation where for each car they sell that the government doesn't want them to sell, that they're punished with a fine. I mean, that is obviously an outrageous imposition.
And then we talked about it yesterday, and you go back and watch our news from yesterday. The Cami plant, GM's Cami plant closed, and Mark Carney and Nina Anand tried to make it sound like it was a Trump thing, when it was clearly a bad investment made by the Liberals and the Ontario and Doug Ford, $518 million in tax dollars for a vehicle they can't sell right now. And it has everything to do with that, as opposed to the tariffs. They have fields of these things, the bright drop van that is not selling. So they're not being honest with Canadians, and not being honest here either. The question that should be asked by reporters is, this auto sector you're trying to save, are you not at the same time trying to kill it with the EV mandates? Because because we did the story too. It was an opinion piece written by the Dealers Association here in British Columbia, saying these EV mandates need to be removed, or there will be no automobile sales. Never mind sector, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like as well, almost the news organizations are kind of burying the lead here, and we kind of just buried it a little bit as well, which I would say is the Liberal Party, who talked so tough. You know, Justin Trudeau was in a very theatrical mode when he announced the retaliatory tariffs. You know, when he comes out and he says billion really dramatically and slowly, like $165 billion. And then you look at this, and it's not just cars, it's also manufacturing, processing, food and beverage packaging, public health, healthcare, public safety, national security. So they've kind of chickened out on these retaliatory tariffs.
So yeah, so Carney's tough talk against Trump, he blinked first, right there.
Absolutely. I mean, to me, that's the lead. Ottawa talked big. They said, we're going to do this. And even Carney said, and we will not remove any of these tariffs until the United States drops their tariffs. They're unjustified, illegal tariffs, etc., etc. But now they're gone. Now they're dropped. And why are they dropped? I would assume because not just Honda, but lots of other companies have called up Mark Carney or Champagne, and they've said, look, if you don't drop this, we're going. We're just going to move to Michigan or something. We're not going to be in Canada.
We can go on the record as saying, if they don't drop the EV mandates, there will be no automobile sector in Canada. I know Carney and the Liberals talk about how they're going to make a made in Canada solution automobile sector. And my question to them is, you know, it's really hard to come up with an automobile brand. Very few have done it. Tesla's the only one that's created a new brand in forever. There is no Canadian automobile brand. There is none. Zero. It's Ford, GM, Stellantis, Honda, and I don't know whoever else has a plant out there in Ontario, because there's no automobile anywhere other than Ontario. I think they make some parts in Quebec. Or is there a plant out there in Quebec? But
they also make bits and bobs in Vancouver area, but it's, you know.
Yeah, but they're not assembling cars. They're not assembling cars. So so there you go. So
but that's the reality. And look, even if it was, we're talking about a US company, Ford, we're talking about a Japanese company, Honda, Stellantis is kind of like multinational, isn't it? The idea is, all right, if we had a Canadian one, then they would be loyal to Canada. But would they? How many companies have we discussed, including Brookfield Asset Management, that at the drop of a hat said, "Anna, screw this. We'll get this will be better for our bottom line if we abandon Canada and move to the US." They do it. They do it without a second thought, and they're gone. It doesn't matter if they're Canadian. You know, we've probably got as much chance of persuading a Japanese company to stay as we have a Canadian one. Unless when they say a homemade automaker, they mean a crown corporation or something like that. And I'm not sure that would go down very well.
Their biggest chance at a Canadian automaker is trying to talk Elon Musk in, who is a Canadian, to come here and make cars. But the way they treat him, I'm sure that he wouldn't give them the time of day. Wouldn't even pick up the phone.
Well, Pierre Poilievre made the mistake a couple of weeks ago, didn't he, of saying, it was a couple of months ago now, of saying that if Elon Musk wants to, if he's interested in opening up a factory in Canada, then, you know, I'd be delighted. He got a lot of heat just for saying that, didn't he?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And then this CTV story, everything is expensive. Tariffs, cost of living, major concerns, and PEI. Again, I just want to put that in there for the one reason is, the biggest asset, I sigh because I keep saying this over again, our biggest asset is energy. Our biggest asset, and if you're running a company and you suppress the biggest asset in exchange for selling something we don't even have, like when they asked to buy our LNG, Justin Trudeau said there's no business case for it. And instead that they would offer to sell them hydrogen in the future, something we don't have. That's not a very good salesman, is it?
But then you have to ask, you know, the real question. Call me a cynic, but I'd say the real question that you'd have to ask is, what is he really selling and who is he selling it to? And I would say it's not energy, and it's not the Germans, the Japanese, or whoever it is that asked for that energy. He's trying to sell something to a pressure group, in effect, which is the environmental lobby.
We've got a clip here for Mark Carney asked about the economy, and he threw his good friend Justin Trudeau under the bus. I guess he forgot that he was the economic advisor to Justin Trudeau. Let's play this clip.
Carney, René Brumer, Montreal Gazette. Last night on Tout le monde en parle, you mentioned that for Justin Trudeau, the economy wasn't a main priority. Could you elaborate on what you meant by that and how you plan to differ?
Yeah. Of course, I'm speaking in relative terms, but I stand by what I said. I'll give you a few examples. Over the course of the last 10 years, the pace of government spending, particularly operational expenditures, rose by an average of 9% a year. 9% year after year after year. That's about twice the rate of growth of the economy. The level of government support for industry and business investment and housing and other factors will be considerable. You'll see when we release our detailed platform, our une plateforme chiffrée.
There you go. He forgets that he was the economic advisor.
Well, I'd also say, again, we've mentioned a few times, like, the assumption on the part of Mark Carney about the intellectual level of the average Canadian citizen. But it seems to me, if he was assuming that the average Canadian is quite smart, which I don't think he is, but if he was assuming that, then our only conclusion there would be either, as you say, he forgot. He's literally just forgotten that he used to be the economic advisor. Or the second possibility is that he advised correctly, in his view. He told Justin Trudeau what he should do, and Justin Trudeau ignored him. And realistically, that's the only conclusion, isn't it? If you're looking at this as a reasonably intelligent person with a bit of common sense, that's what you have to assume. Is that Mark Carney was there in Ottawa, and he was banging on the desk saying, "Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this," and Justin Trudeau just thought, "Nah, I'm just going to do it." So what does that tell you? Justin Trudeau thought that Mark Carney's economic advice was worthless and didn't follow it. I mean, that's not exactly a good endorsement, is it?
I'd also say, though, that while Mark Carney was advising Canada on economic policy, he's also influential on all policy. And he was also the CEO at the same time of Brookfield Asset Management, and he advised them to cheat Canada out of $5 billion in taxes in a tax haven that President Obama called the biggest tax scam in the world.
Yeah, and he was also in charge when they left Canada, so losing everything associated with that, having the headquarters in Toronto.
I mean, that's a serious question I don't think reporters are asking. You were actually the economic advisor to Canada, while at the same time you were advising Brookfield to dodge $5 billion in taxes. Do you not see a conflict there? You were actually advising on policy, which could include tax policy, right? Because part of economic activity in Canada is collecting taxes. That's what the government does. Really, that's its revenue. It collects taxes. It doesn't make things, it collects taxes.
And that's pretty much the most important thing that it does. Like, if you look in ancient history, thousands of years ago, that's usually the sign that a state has begun, is that they start to collect taxes. It's like, you can't get more important than that.
That is the economic policy. You collect taxes or royalties in that. And then you spend from what you collect. So while he was advising on taxes in the economy, he was also advising Brookfield on how to evade taxes owed to Canada.
And he was also working for the UN, wasn't he? And as we know very well, or anybody that's been paying attention for the last 50 years knows very well, the objectives of the United Nations are not necessarily the same as those of Canada. They don't necessarily share the same interests, those two entities.
And then this is out all over the place. Carney now says, he said this just, pipeline's not necessarily among the major projects to prioritize. I mean, this is what we've been saying for a while. Like the way he's using the words, and he says, we're going to build an east-west energy gateway. And then he says electricity sometimes. And he also, like you said, key word there, east to west. So east to west, selling Quebec Hydro to Alberta because they're going to keep 80% of the hydrocarbons in the ground. So Daniel,
It's important as well to mention the language he was speaking when he said this, because it was a French debate show, wasn't it? When he said, "Oh, French interview," and obviously it's the same old speaking out of two different sides of his mouth, depending on what language he's speaking in.
yeah. So I mean, this has come out so many times now that, you know, people. I've talked to a lot of people say they're gonna vote Liberal, and they say because he's gonna build pipelines. I'm like, I don't think he is actually. This goes against his whole mandates of what he's talked about. So.
But I mean, also it's a fundamental. It's almost been a kind of religious belief for the Liberal Party over the last 10 or more years that we're going to hit peak oil soon. We're going to hit peak fossil fuel, and the worst possible thing that you could do as a society is spend like $50 billion on a pipeline or something like that, and then nobody wants it because everybody is on solar panels and all the rest of it. Like that's like central to the belief system of your average sort of Liberal MP and Liberal minister. So one would assume that that's also central to Mark Carney's belief system, because it certainly was explicitly the case that that's what Carney believed and said he believed before he became the Prime Minister.
The Jean Chrétien Liberals, which was my favorite leader, Jean Chrétien and the Liberals, he let the MPs think for themselves. These MPs don't think for themselves. They just repeat lines. Like, that's why they're so bad when they're doing interviews. They have no idea what they believe in.
Well, I would say it's quite important, I would say, to mention this, that that's also true of the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
When was the last time you saw a Conservative MP say anything even remotely original, rather than just a repetition of something that Pierre Poilievre said? Like, this is why we had the conversation not long ago, didn't we, about how it's becoming almost presidential now, Canadian politics. I would say this election is undoubtedly a presidential election. It's like, who are you for? Are you for Carney for president or Poilievre for president? Because the Westminster system has just been completely forgotten in this election. I mean, there are people, I would say the vast, like 99% of Canadians would be unable to mention 5 Conservative MPs, you know, if you exclude Poilievre, because it's just, they are completely irrelevant. It's all about Poilievre. And the same is, I mean, it's less true for Carney because there are ministers that we're familiar with, but they're trying to really emphasize Carney's prominence.
Yep. And then Andrew Scheer put out this tweet here saying, and there's a clip, and I didn't put it in here, but the clip just basically says Mark Carney says he wants to push up the tax on flying to make it more expensive for you to fly. So there you go.
Well, flying is a real bête noire, isn't it, for a lot of these environmentalists? Although I call them environmentalists, but they're a particular sort of group within the environmentalist sort of, you know, sector, or whatever you want to call it.
They fly a lot, but they're flying for a purpose to stop you from flying, so that in itself makes it good.
It's almost, yeah, I'm almost tempted to call it this sort of side of environmentalism. It's kind of almost like an authoritarian environmentalism, where they want to, their environmentalism motivates them to obtain power and then create laws and force people to, for example, not fly or whatever it is, or not drive, or, you know, the EV mandates. There's that sort of species of environmentalist. But then there's also the environmentalists that kind of like go and live in the Congo or something and try and look after gorillas. And, you know, I feel like the Carney version of environmentalists kind of cashes in on the prestige and affection that people have for the people that care for gorillas or whatever, when really they're very different. They're very different people, aren't they? They have very different ambitions.
Well, the big debates are coming up. The French one first, and then the English one right after that. And Maxime Bernier out, but the Green Party guy in.
I wonder why that is. What could possibly be the reason for that? 2 absolute non-entities that nobody cares about, but we'll have the one that's on the far left.
Well, he would be definitely supportive of the right party, one in the center there.
But in a sense, look, if you're a conservative, this is a good thing for you, I would say, because it means that Poilievre will have complete mastery of the right. Nobody's going to challenge him from the right. And whereas for Carney, he's going to be challenged by Singh and the Green fella. Although I say nobody's going to challenge Poilievre from the right, but it is true that the Bloc are kind of like, they're a weird set of like nationalists. They're almost like on the right, but they're in denial about it, aren't they? And they act left. So you might get some trouble from the Bloc. But in general, anyway, this is going to be Carney being attacked from the left by three other people.
I'd say that
Poilievre is master of the field.
the weak flank for the Liberals would be the Bloc in Quebec, because they count on winning so many seats in Quebec. So
yeah, but they're difficult to understand because they're very like ethnocentric, the Bloc, and that is the most obvious, clear version of right-wing politics that exists. So you kind of, the Bloc they're a mixed bag really, and that's the same for all of the nationalists in Quebec. I think they seem left on a lot of things, but fundamentally they're right-wing about Quebec and French and very authoritarian as well. So it's kind of like you can get mixed up there.
Sam Cooper put out this tweet, says, CSIS warned in next election Beijing would brand conservatives Trumpian. Carney's campaign is doing that himself.
It's an interesting, like, he gets some amazing stuff on China, this guy, some people from the Bureau. But it is an interesting document where it says that there's a line in here. So it's written by CSIS. And there's a line here, where is it? There. It's easy to influence Chinese immigrants to agree with the PRC's stance. The PRC being Communist China. I just think that's very interesting. That's what they look at Chinese immigrants as being, like sort of fodder for the Chinese Communist Party to come and manipulate them. It's an odd one. I mean, a lot of the Chinese people that I've met really, in Canada, really don't like the Chinese Communist Party. That's kind of like why they're here in the first place,
Yeah. Ethics Commissioner won't rule on Carney's CBC funding pledge. And you and I talked about that and said that in itself is ridiculous to come out and offer the bribe up to the CBC during the election.
Yeah. Well, it's quite astonishing, that, isn't it? And then the good old Ethics Commissioner, always rely on the Ethics Commissioner to do the right thing. What about the ethics of the Ethics Commissioner? That's what I want to.
Maybe we should check them. And the National Post put out this piece saying the Liberal candidate who's parachuted in to replace an earlier candidate with over concerns his ties to China was himself an attendee at the massive military parade in Beijing.
I mean, we just keep seeing this again and again and again, don't we? I mean, it's absolutely crystal clear now, as I've said and as you've said, that for whatever reason, the Chinese Communist Party, and we have to say there is no way to know this, because the Chinese Communist Party in the upper echelons is a completely sealed box. Nobody knows anything about it, even though they pretend that they know. The only people that know are like the members of the Politburo, basically. So it's like 5 people or something like that. But for whatever reason, whatever motivation they have, they seem to have an obvious preference in this election, and it's for the Liberal Party to win and the Conservatives to lose. So, we can only speculate as to why that is, but it seems evident to me that they want the Liberals to win.
Yeah, and then Doug Ford saying that if Poilievre had his campaign manager, he wouldn't be in this trouble right now. And he's getting a lot of flack for that. So,
yeah, well, he hasn't gone to bat for Poilievre. He hasn't said anything. He hasn't said anything about this. He hasn't stumped for him. He hasn't advised people to back Poilievre, even though he's a nominal conservative. Obviously, anybody that knows anything about Doug Ford knows that he's not a conservative at all. He's, if you wanted to give his politics a name, it would be Fordism, because he's just all about himself. But he's not a conservative. Nor is he really a liberal. But the thing is, he hasn't said a word really about Poilievre. They supposedly, hate each other anyway. And he didn't congratulate, Poilievre didn't congratulate Ford apparently when he won his election and all the rest of it. And so there's obviously no love lost there. But it's one thing to kind of say, all right, I don't like Poilievre, so I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. That's one thing. But it's another thing to come out and say, Poilievre is running a crap campaign. He's going to lose the election. And if he had my guy, he would win. I mean, that's kind of, that's a negative attack, isn't it? So that's a negative contribution, let's say.
Yeah. We do have an international story here, and I thought I'd put that in because this is important if it happens. So we're going to play this clip here from Fox News.
Do you really see a deal emerging? Are you confident?
I think you used a very good word there, Sean, emerging. I do. This is the third meeting I've had with him. This last meeting lasted close to 5 hours. We had two of his key advisors in the room at the time, Ushakov and Kirill Dmitriev. And it was a compelling meeting. And towards the end, we actually came up with, and I'm going to say finally, but I don't mean it in the way that we were waiting. I mean it in the way that it took a while for us to get to this place. What Putin's request is to have a permanent peace here. So beyond a ceasefire, we got an answer to that.
There you go. I mean, it remains to be seen if anything happens there, but they seem to be confident there that something was moving along there.
Well, I wouldn't hold your breath.
Yeah, there you go.
The Trump administration seems a little bit gullible when it comes to Putin. They seem to fall for his old KGB tricks quite a lot. Quite sort of pitiful, actually, in a way. But let's see. Maybe they'll outsmart us all in the end.
Let's look at markets. When I clipped this, it was up, and now it's flat. So there you go. It's like it changes pretty fast. So there you go. Gold was up this morning. Where's gold at? Like exactly right now. Any ideas there? I'll find it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
gold expert, man.
It's up about $11. So there you go. So gold's up this morning. Bitcoin hanging in there as well. I think it's going to take that run at that $100,000 mark for sure. Slowly chunking away at the chart there. Looking good though. And the Canadian dollar, look at that. Holding there just under the 72-cent mark there too. And that mostly has to do with the weakness in the USD as opposed to the other way around. Most currencies had rallied. There you go in our AI.
I mean, we'll take what we can get. I think.
You bet. In our AI and tech here, we've got this. This is like this. Some of these video makers are just crazy. We're going to play this little clip here. This is out of a look at that. That's just crazy.
That really tells you why. When was it? A couple of years ago now? Why the Hollywood? I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, the
Writers
Guild.
Or,
yeah,
one of the guilds. That's why they went on strike, because they saw this way before any of us saw what this is going to do. Because that's like what you just saw there represents basically lost jobs.
Tons of lost jobs. Yeah. In our EV section here, so 5 years after debuting Indiana's Tesla police car, the Bargerville's police department says has saved them nearly $500,000 in maintenance repairs, because there's really no maintenance or repairs on these cars. That's the thing it says. Like, he said they're saving about $70,000 to $80,000 a year having these vehicles, and no brakes, all that kind of stuff, not to do with the brakes. The department has 16 officers, and they started with one Tesla in 2019 and since added another dozen, so they got like 13 Teslas in their fleet now. So they never replaced the brakes, and the gas cars run about $1,200 to $1,500 a year, and he doesn't have any of those repair costs. So he's like saying they're awesome. You can sneak up on
the acceleration would be one of the reasons as well, because like
and you can sneak
just
up
really zoom down the highway, can't you?
And you can sneak up on people.
Yeah. And you can self-drive while you eat your donuts.
There you go. Whoa. Mass market EV sellers.
was that a low blow? Sorry, please.
The mass market EV sellers ranked by brand. This is for the first quarter in the U.S. here. Tesla, far and away the biggest seller at 128,000. I think we had a chart to put up there. No, he doesn't have it. Yeah, Tesla at 128,000. Ford is next at 22,000 sales, and there you go. Cadillac coming in at the bottom there, 75.92. And here you go. Here's our memes. This is where we have some fun. Keep in mind, this is fun. This is all about fun. Don't get all worked up. Just fun. So here's our meme. 10 years of liberal policy, right? And the angriness, right? They've gotten away with it. They've actually gotten away with it for so many people. They got one issue that they just talk about because they don't want to take any responsibility for all that stuff that's coming down the hill there.
And all it took was a switcheroo.
Yeah.
You know, the oldest trick in the book. And it's worked perfectly.
Justin's probably wondering how he can get back in there. The switcheroo, the old switcheroo, the re-switcheroo, the unswitcheroo.
It's time for a change.
The other one here is Walmart. Scholars now believe Bible verse, they were naked and felt no shame, was written about Walmart people. Everybody's always heard about the Walmartians. When you go into Walmart, it's always entertaining.
I think in America, that's particularly true. And another thing about America is, like, I can remember walking around in Walmart, and you do see a lot of that. People, like, scantily clad. But then you also see people with pistols, like, strapped to their side. Yeah. You know, the ones where it's visible carry or whatever they call it, where you can just have your gun.
And then even Space returned an Amazon package.
Yeah. Well, nobody would want the contents of that package, would they?
So Amazon, or Blue Origin, I guess it is. I've had an all-female crew go up. And then
He sent his wife up there, didn't he, Bezos?
Yeah.
Must have really trusted it.
There's a lot of flack going on about this one. It's just kind of silly. Because I think Katy Perry is putting on a post saying, you know, like, well, all her accomplishments, an astronaut, and then people are attacking her and say, you're not really an astronaut, you were just on a flight there. You just happened to be sitting in a... Anyway. People are
what's the definition of an astronaut? I mean, she might be right. Katy Perry, you know, she's usually good on her etymology, isn't she?
Yeah. I'm not sure how far Blue Origin is going into space, because there was that big debate before when Richard Branson with Galactica and SpaceX and Blue Origin, because the two of them, Galactica and Blue Origin, didn't go that far into orbit and would not considered space. They were still in the atmosphere, so I'm not sure.
Yeah. Branson, it's hard to even remember, but he was once considered to be like ahead, wasn't he, in the private space, in the private space industry, and now he's like so far behind, isn't he?
Well, I believe he won that X Prize contest, didn't he? That was Galactica when they won that X Prize contest with Peter Diamandis.
Right.
Who we had speak here at Level Up here in 2024.
Well, and what happened to that? You know, he lost his lead, didn't he? Elon Musk ate his lunch.
Yeah. There you go. That's our show for today. Sorry about the cold and the cough every now and then. I'm working on it. Trying to get past it. Yeah, we'll be back tomorrow. You can follow us here on Now Media YouTube, X, TikTok. No Facebook or Instagram, though, because of Bill C-18. There you go. I'm supposed to have an interview with a Liberal candidate here at 11 o'clock, so we'll see. And then Renee Merrifield's in at noon with Beyond the Ballot. Those are always exciting. So lots to do today. Hope to see you later in the day. So at 11 and at noon, I'll be back. Until then, thank you for watching Now Media.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.